when we were going to our scheduled safari trip thing we had booked through like this group that I read. It's called Platinum Heritage online. They had like the best reviews for their desert safari experience compared to the other groups that I checked out. And also, like, I have been on 2 desert safari experiences in the past, one time in Egypt and then the other time during my first trip to Dubai in October, and I felt like they were fine, but they were very like generic. It wasn't a lot of like it wasn't super satisfying. I wanted to go with a group that was really like the cream of the crop, and I didn't mind paying a little extra. So that's how I ended up selecting this particular group to book our desert safari with this time in Dubai. And then the guy that picked us up though, he definitely had some sort of a chip on his shoulder. So first of all, he was like very, very, you could tell that he was very, I don't want to say like a fetishist, but he was one of those people that definitely had some sort of a thing for Japan. Like he was very excited to see that there were 2 girls from Tokyo in his group. The other annoying thing in Dubai is that people don't grasp or like understand the concept. It doesn't occur to them that like you can live in Tokyo and not be Japanese, and you can also be an Asian, like a Japanese adjacent Asian, an Asian that looks Japanese but is not Japanese that lives in Tokyo. There's plenty of us here. Okay, hi, we've been here, and I don't hold it against most people, right? Like if they haven't been to Tokyo, if they haven't had much experience in Asia in general. I mean, now that I'm saying it, I still don't think it's an excuse, because I also like when I go to Dubai, I don't assume that everybody is Emirati, or even like when I go to Egypt, I don't assume that everyone's Egypt. But I guess if you're not somebody who is well traveled or who's used to like who grew up traveling to different places and understanding different cultures and understanding that every place has certain immigrant groups. Even for me, right, like in Tokyo, there are still certain enclaves of people from a country that I probably never heard of that are living in Tokyo. But if you're not a third culture kid, if you didn't grow up with that kind of experience, I can see how it would be easy for you to generalize that okay, anyone from Tokyo is Japanese, or anyone who is from China, because they ask you where you're from, and I'm like, well, it's not that simple. But I don't get triggered anymore. I used to get super triggered by that question, but I just like I indulge people a little bit, and then if I feel like okay, I don't want to take part in this conversation anymore, I'll just like respectfully bow out, right? But with this guy, this is the guide that was assigned to pick us up from our hotel for the safari excursion. First off, he told us that he told us that one of us had to sit in the front and the other one had to sit in the back because like there was not enough room. But there was actually enough room. When he came to our hotel, he was driving a van that had 3 rows of seats in the back. So, oh no, there was 2 rows of seats in the back, but he was responsible for picking up 6 people. So by the time he got to our hotel, there were 2 girls that were from somewhere in Europe that he had already picked up. They were sitting in the first row, right? So there was like, it was them 2, and then there was one more seat in that row. But then the entire back row, it was empty, right? Because he had to pick up 2 more groups of people. Are you following? 6 people in total. 2 girls were already there when he arrived at our hotel. Me and Meg, my friend. And then after we got on the car, he was going to go to a final hotel to pick up the last 2 people who were actually a couple from Germany, I think. So, like, theoretically, if you think about it, it would have made the most sense for me and Meg, to just get into the last row of the car, because like the last row of seats in the car, right? Because that whole row was empty. But he told us that, oh, one of you should sit like in the first row, next to the 2 girls from Europe, and then one of you needs to sit in the front with me. And I know that like that was, whether subconsciously or not, that's not what had to happen, right? Like in a normal situation, he would have just told us to both get into the back where there was still like ample seating in the last row. But because he for sure wanted to sit next to me for some reason, he made it seem as if we had to split up so that at least one of us, right, whether it was me or my other friend who's from Japan, who he had some sort of like a boner for, he wanted to make sure that one of us sat next to him so that by the time he picked up the last couple, they could just sit in the last row of the car. So I already I clocked that immediately when he said that, but whatever. I'm a friendly person. I'll humor you. So I sit in the front, and then he immediately starts bombarding me with all these invasive, not invasive, but just annoying questions that, especially in a car in front of other people, because remember, it's like us plus the other two girls, plus eventually it was going to be we were going to pick up the last couple. We also, me and my friend, we don't know the other groups that are in this car, so I feel that it was kind of inappropriate. Like, he was trying to ask me a bunch of questions about how life was in Tokyo, and he was basically trying to mansplain to me also. Whenever I would not give him what he wanted, I wouldn't affirm any of his stereotypes that he was saying about what he perceived life to be like in Tokyo. Because I also called him out on it subtly at one point. I was like, yeah, so have you ever been to Tokyo, like, in a very friendly way, but also letting you know that I'm calling you out. And he was like, this guy was very, very defensive, had a chip on his shoulder. Again, I don't think that he's a bad person or anything. I actually think, by the end of the trip, when he dropped us back to our hotel after the whole excursion was done, we kind of we got to the root of the issue, which is that he was just very, very tired and overworked, which I guess you can say that goes for 99% of the workforce in Dubai, especially the people that are running all of the tourist experiences. But anyways, when I indulged him and sat in the front seat, he kept bombarding me with questions and just assumptions and stereotypical things about Tokyo. And so I would, every time that I just I wouldn't give him what he was looking for, I was very, I remained very polite, very feminine, very pleasant, but I was just not going to co-sign whatever he said. I'm not here to validate whatever fantasy or false ideas you have about Tokyo. I'm here because I paid for this safari experience, right? And I'm also not what you think, in the sense that I'm not a Japanese girl that was born and raised in Japan. I have a very unique story, right? I'm Chinese American, born and raised in the States. I moved to Japan. I learned Japanese in high school, in college, and I moved to Japan right after college graduation so that I could start working here immediately. And this stuff is, it's fine. I don't mind telling people if we're in a conversation, but I don't owe anybody that I don't want to speak to this story, right? And I especially don't owe you, because you're a tour guide operator. So we are not I'm not here to validate you in any way. I'm not here to be your entertainment or to just validate your faulty perceptions of what Japan is like. I'm here because I'm a paying customer, right? So that was the dynamic. I could have complained about him if I wanted to, but since I'm a nice person, I didn't, because I could sense that he wasn't a bad person. He just had a huge chip on his shoulder. So when I called him out and I said, "Oh, so have you been to Tokyo?" He was like, "Oh no, but I read a lot of books, okay?" But I wasn't saying that in a sense that it was just a statement, an innocent question, just like all of the borderline invasive questions that you have been pummeling me with throughout this entire trip, which, again, I don't care because I don't get triggered by that stuff anymore. But if you think about the context, it was actually quite inappropriate because we were not alone with him in the car. There were other people in the car, right? That were overhearing our conversation. And even if there was not other people, it's just not appropriate, period, because the relationship here is that you are the tour guide and I'm the customer paying for this tour. I'm not here to entertain you, but that was what he was trying to make the dynamic into. Anyway, so I wasn't really answering him. And then I think he was like, "Oh, so do you enjoy, how long have you been there?" And I was like, "Oh yeah, 10 years. Oh, so do you enjoy working there? Because I heard that the work culture, they make you do a bunch of overtime." And I was like, yeah, some companies do, but not all companies. That's just the extreme case. I wasn't giving him, he probably perceived it as I was making things difficult or I was being ornery, but I'm literally just giving you the true portrayal of what goes on in Japan, or the true portrayal of my experience in Japan, which is not whatever you think it is, right? So why do I have to acquiesce to what your fantasy of my life is, especially since I don't even know you? There was a point during the car ride where he asked me a question, right? He was like, "Oh, something about my job that he had no business asking about. And then I was like, oh, like pretending to think about it. And then his phone rang. So he had to pick up the phone. And of course, it's one of his colleagues talking to him about, I don't know, like how long is it going to take for you, or how many minutes are you away from the campsite? And then after he hangs up the phone, so I couldn't answer anyway because he had to pick up the phone, right? Like his phone rang and he had to answer his colleague. But then after he hang up, he made this gesture to me like, okay, so what's the story? And then he literally was like, oh, what's the matter? Like, you don't want to talk about it? And it's like, dude, I couldn't. Number one, no, I don't want to talk about it. I don't owe you anything, right? Like, I don't owe you any sort of story or sensational stories about my life in Tokyo. But like, number two, the phone literally rang in the middle of your questioning of me. So how is this like, how is this my problem? Why are you trying to make it like my issue that, oh, I don't want to talk about it? No, the phone rang. So I let you answer your phone because obviously you have to, like, obviously your work is a priority in this situation. But it was just funny, like watching him dig himself deeper and deeper into a hole. Because again, when you master the art of ignoring the shit out of everything, you're basically giving the other party all the rope that they need to hang themselves. It was really funny. He kept going like on the way back. So after the safari was done, he had to drop us, the same 6 people, off back to our hotels, and then me and my friend were the last 2 people in the car. Again, he was like, oh, those 2 girls from Europe, they made us late in the morning, so that's why I was late picking you up, because they were taking forever to get ready to come down. And we were like, okay, yeah, cool, dude, like we don't care, it's over already, you don't need to like clear your name. Every time I was talking to my friend, like I wasn't even really talking to him, but I was just talking to Meg about how, oh, last time when I was in Egypt, I was planning to go on a hot air balloon ride, but then we couldn't do it because of the weather. And then this guy literally interjected and he was like, oh, ours is better. And I was like, excuse me, was I talking to you? But he was like, oh, like if you want a hot air balloon experience or any of those like typical experiences, ours is like 10 times better than any other tour company out there. And then he, like, without us asking or without any prompting whatsoever, he's like, here, and he hands us the brochure of their company. And it's just so funny to me because I'm like, the reason that I booked this desert safari experience with the Platinum Heritage Company is because I read good reviews of them online. So you're actually working against the good reputation and the good image of the company that I already had in my head by acting this way towards us. Like, you realize that, right? But they don't realize that, because people who are reactive and who act based on their emotions, they don't know how they appear to other people. So yeah, that was that was a funny one. And it's like, it happens every single day. You need to be on guard, especially if you're like very attractive, if you have a very positive, light spirit, as everyone on this channel, I'm sure, is working on cultivating. If you radiate positivity like that, people are just naturally going to be drawn to you. A lot of times men will see women who are, fully in their femininity and just in their joy and their positive light, and they will be so desperate to get a piece of that radiance and a piece of that light that they will do anything, literally anything, to catch your attention, basically. So remember what we say, attention is currency. This is why it's important for you to not give away your attention so freely to people.